I was gobsmacked by this. Not that I expected McConnell was going to follow the facts and where they would lead, which would be to remove Donald Trump from office. This is a partisan process. It's going to be a partisan process. But to basically admit before you even start the trial that it's rigged is just quite astonishing. And in a way, it reminds me of Donald Trump in the campaign saying, Russia, if you're listening, get the emails. Followed by just a few weeks ago, China, if you're listening, get me dirt on Biden. I'm going to say it right out in the open, and what are you going to do about it? And I would add just one thing to this, Ari, which is I'm not sure that every Republican in the Senate is going to rejoice when they see this clip, because they're still going to have to vote on the rules, and they're going to have to vote if there are going to be any witnesses, whether if the Chief Justice says, for example, that the House managers can call in Mick Mulvaney or Rudy Giuliani, they can vote by simple majority to block that, which wouldn't look too good for them. And you've got a half dozen Republicans in the Senate up in 2020 who may not want to be put in that position.
Joyce, I want to play something from Senator Byron Dorgan, who was also around during that Clinton impeachment, talking about the different approach that even the Democratic leaders took there. They were in some touch at times, obviously, with the White House and their party, but they didn't do what McConnell's doing. They had a different approach. Take a look.
We developed a template for how to go to this trial and how to conduct the trial. And we had two leaders, Senator Daschle and Senator Lott, respected each other, and they wanted to make sure this was done the right way and done in a way that was bipartisan. And that's exactly the way it happened. Now, obviously, the Senate's a very different place.
Sure, but just to hit the point, did the then Democratic leader, Senator Daschle, did he say publicly or did he privately intimate to your caucus that he was coordinating everything with the White House?
No, not at all. I mean, nothing like this.
Joyce? Joyce?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Ari. Say again.
I just called on you for your response to the whole issue, and we were playing, if you could hear it, Senator Dorgan's response.
Yeah. I did. And, like Norm, I was gobsmacked last night when I first saw this tape. It was very difficult to process that the leader of the Senate went on national television and vowed to violate the oath of office that he was going to take when impeachment proceedings started. And as I have watched it over and over today, I'm even more disbelieving than I was the first time that I saw it. Of course, we know that that's not how the Clinton process worked. It is, of course, inherently a political process. But what happened during Clinton was much more in line with our expectations. The problem going into impeachment after having McConnell take this sort of a vow is there's no way that Trump can truly be exonerated. Even if the Senate votes to acquit him, it's a rigged jury. It's not an acquittal.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.